Honestly, I don't think I anticipated this kind of a backlash. My mother was always very, very skeptic, when I even started the project. In the past, I'd written, my first book was on the history of Mysore, the Wodeyars of Mysore. And in that, there is one entire section on the very controversial era of Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali. So it was not even a complete book on Tipu or whatever. But you know how Tipu also raises a lot of heckles in today's India, particularly the state I come from, Karnataka. And my effigies were burnt in the heart of the city. This was about 10 years ago. A couple of lectures of mine were shouted down by a few fundamentalists who had come in, and the topic was Tipu's secularism, is it a myth? So obviously that raised a lot of tensions, and it had come on the front pages of newspapers that a lecture was actually shouted down. So I've been no stranger to the kind of backlash that these people, unleash. And so my mother was always very, very skeptic, and being a Maharashtrian herself, she knew the kind of backlash and the highly polarized opinion that Savarkar draws. And so she'd always warned me, do you really want to do this? Are you really sure? I know you're truly a sucker for punishment and for controversy, but is it something that you'd want to do? But then in the last 1 month, as you've seen, last 1 or 2 months, the avalanche of, criticism and scrutiny and delegitimizing someone, personal slander, I don't think I anticipated this kind of reaction. And to be very honest, I mean, these are the same people, the so-called academic and trained historians, professional historians, who all the time talk about Brahminism and so on. But then ultimately that's what it is. It's an elitist clique. You belong to that cabal, and then you are fitted, you are recognized. If anything goes outside the realm of the accepted norm, then you are subjected to slander. It's quite an irony that, they talk about Ekalavya, but somebody like me, who I consider myself as the Ekalavya in this Guru Dron's club of historians, who has probably been outside the system and challenging them. So time and again, आज के दिन में भी एकलव्य को अपना अंगूठी देना पड़ता है, उस पे बार-बार सवाल उठाए जाते हैं कि आप कौन हैं, आपके credentials क्या हैं, though I may have a PhD in history, that doesn't matter, पर क्या आप इस सर्कल के से बिलोंग करते हैं? अगर नहीं करते हैं तो आपका औचित्य क्या है इस चीज की बात करने की? तो I think it is very obvious that in the last 70 years, the persona non grata that Savarkar had become, where today at least हम लोग एक mainstream एक मंच पे इनके बारे में चर्चा कर पा रहे हैं, परंतु 20 साल पहले भी या 15 साल पहले ये करना शायद नामुमकिन था. Anybody who even spoke about Savarkar, they would have had to pay a very heavy price for their career, for their livelihoods. I repeated so many times that someone of the eminence of Pandit Hridaynath Mangeshkar ji, जो लता जी के भाई थे, वो ऑल इंडिया रेडियो में काम करते थे, और सावरकर जी न केवल एक राजनीतिक आइडियोलॉग थे, पर he was also a great poet, प्रखर कवि, बहुत ही एक सेंसिटिव playwright, orator, journalist, many dimensions to his career. तो उनके बहुत सारे कविताएं हैं जो देशभक्ति से ओतप्रोत हैं, जो मराठी का वो वेरी फेमस पोएम ने मजसी ने परत मातृभूमिला सागरा प्राण तड़मड़ला, और फिर जयोस्तुते श्री महान मंगले शिवास्पदे शुभदे स्वतंत्रते भगवती त्वामहम यशोयुताम वंदे. तो ये सारे जो कविताएं हैं उनको हृदयनाथ मंगेशकर जी ने ट्यून किया था, और लता जी, आशा जी, सब ने इसको गाया था और रिकॉर्ड किया था. एंड उसी समय हृदयनाथ जी ऑल इंडिया रेडियो में काम कर रहे थे, तो उसके लिए उनको एक शो कॉज नोटिस मिला कि कैन यू एक्सप्लेन व्हाई यू हैव चोजन दिस पोएम. तो हृदयनाथ जी ने जवाब में दिया वेरी नॉनशैलेंटली कि गुड पोएम, ग्रेट पोएट, आई थिंक दैट्स रीजन इनफ टू ट्यून इट, पर फॉर दैट क्राइम he actually got sacked from All India Radio. उनको अपनी नौकरी खोनी पड़ी. तो ऐसी एक और आज हम बोलते हैं कि India has become intolerant, असहिष्णुता बहुत ज़्यादा हो गई है. परंतु this was the thing where आप किसी से घृणा करें, आप किसी से प्रेम करें, वो अलग बात है. पर उनके बारे में चर्चा भी ना हो, उनके बारे में एक बौद्धिक रूप से एक परामर्श और विचार वो भी ना हो. I think that is completely being fascist, completely being intolerant, and Savarkar has been the victim of this attitude. And today, as you rightly pointed, I think even he did not, get some of the kind of hate which is directed at his biographer, and I think that is par for the course. One has to develop a thicker skin to face these onslaughts.
Yes, and what I also found very amusing was that a so-called historian who runs an organization that shortlisted one of Vikram's books for a prize, later on started bashing the same book. Arey bhai, agar bash karna hai to shortlist kyun kar rahe ho? So, it's one of those things, but as you talked about, Mr. Mangeshkar paid a prize. The interesting thing is कि कुछ छुपे हुए ये hate नहीं है. This is out in the open. This is unabashed hate. It is like you are proclaiming to the world that I hate you for writing that book, and I will destroy you. And you talked about Mangeshkar, but there was Mr. Chandrachud wrote a book called Supreme Whispers, which was interviews of ex-Supreme Court Chief Justices. और उसमें ये बताया गया है कि मुंबई हाई कोर्ट के एक जज जिनको everyone was almost ready and everyone was on the same table, they had agreed that he will be elevated to the Supreme Court. But in the interim, he went to the funeral of Mr. Golwalkar. And the next day, Indira Gandhi removed him from the name. So it is in your face. You know, if you take a stand over something, over principles, you are going to be cancelled. The question is, are you prepared to pay the price? So this is my question to you, Vikram, because you will see a lot of your contemporaries who are a tenth or maybe 100th as capable as you are in your domain, will reach much higher. You will see that as the time progresses. So the question is, are you prepared to pay that price?
Completely prepared to pay that price, because I really have nothing to lose. I reject their system, I reject that clique. I'm not part of it, I'm not part of any university, तो मुझे किसी भी fellowship या किसी भी awards etc. की कोई इच्छा नहीं है कि that they can manipulate my future. I think my biggest treasure are my readers. And the people of this country who have been showering me so much love that I sometimes wonder, do I even deserve all of this? आपको याद होगा, I think in April में जब हम दोनों अस्पताल चले गए थे, you are a rock star, you come every night and smash every argument that is posed against you in just 30 seconds. In 30 seconds और दीजिए 30 seconds में आप सबका खात्मा कर देते हैं. तो आपके लिए जो प्रार्थनाएं हुई जब आप अस्पताल में थे वो तो समझ में आता है. But the kind of prayers that came my way when I almost lost my life to COVID in April, that is more important than all these chauthi fails or whoever else. Their acceptance. That the love, the genuine affection. I was recently in Pune, और वहाँ पे it was a street side road seller, the Solanki bookstores, और वहाँ पे on a morning, weekday morning, there were about 100 people. There was a lady who came and did aarti, someone who tied a Maharashtrian safa. So what more does a writer need? What more does a historian need कि आपने जो लिखा है वो लोगों तक पहुँच रहा है और लोग उसको समझ रहे हैं, पढ़ रहे हैं और उनका आशीर्वाद मिल रहा है.
और तो इनफैक्ट से मुझे लगता है गुस्सा आपके कंटेम्पररीज जो कि ऑन द अदर साइड ऑफ द आयरन कर्टन है, उनको गुस्सा ये आता है कि आपने फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम I've read both volumes and so many people have read both volumes. आपने सावरकर के बारे में एक भी चीज छुपाई नहीं. Every citation that you could think of that exists in the world about Savarkar, good, bad, ugly, whatever, is in your book. And that is what they hate, because when they write history books, it is to sanitize the person. So when you write, when they write a book on Nehru, उनकी सिर्फ अच्छी चीजें ही आपको पता चले. But so is that one of the reasons why they hate? Your objectivity is hated more than, the objectivity of, or the subjectivity of their historians? Is that one of the reasons why they come after you?
Possibly, I really don't know, because both the books have about 100-120 pages of footnotes and bibliography. तो उसको अगर खारिज करना है तो आपको उसके डबल रिसर्च करना पड़ेगा, उसका डबल एफर्ट डालना पड़ेगा, जो बहुत सारे लोगों को शायद करना मुश्किल होगा. तो इसीलिए the best thing, when you can't attack the message, you attack the messenger. And but then, as you said, Anand, I am not bothered at all, not one bit. So actually, to take the bull by the horns, एक मेरे लेक्चर के लिए मेरा पुतला जलाया गया वहाँ पे बैंगलोर पे. Now I'm going full hog and writing an entire biography of टिपू सुल्तान. अब पता नहीं इसके बाद क्या होगा. तो आई थिंक मेरे सारे जो मित्र हैं आउटसाइड इंडिया, लंदन वगैरह, उन सबको मैंने बोल रखा है. आई डिड माय पीएचडी फ्रॉम ऑस्ट्रेलिया, तो मेरे सुपरवाइजर को भी बोल दिया है कि अगर कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो तो वहाँ अजाइलम के लिए मेरा सारा इंतजाम आप कर दीजिए, ताकि आई डोंट नो फतवा कब निकल जाए कि आप भारत छोड़ो आंदोलन.
एक तो ये भी गुस्सा आता है आपके एनिमीज को कि आप जेएनयू से भी नहीं.
आप तो हैं जेएनयू से, so I'm actually talking with the enemy.
But I must warn you of the mantle that you have picked up about writing about Tipu Sultan. I think when before BJP was the government in Karnataka during Congress rule, a journalist talked about Tipu Sultan, and he was actually jailed. I forget the name of the journalist. And barely a month ago in Aurangabad, somebody objected to a objective post on Aurangzeb, the man who killed 4.6 million Hindus and destroyed countless temples. And there were riots. Policemen were injured in those riots. तो आपको मैं ये वार्न कर दूं कि टीपू सुल्तान पे जो आप लिख रहे हैं, that is
आप मेरी माँ की भूमिका बहुत अच्छी तरह से निभा रहे हैं. जो वो नहीं, वो कर रही थी और असफल हुई. आई थिंक आप वो डर पैदा कर रहे हैं, बट आई थिंक इट्स ओके. आई थिंक हिस्ट्री इज सच अ लाइव बैटलफील्ड कि unless people take the bull by the horns and address these issues, बार मैंने वही कहा है कि we have had a very very stormy and difficult past. And it is necessary to confront the truth and have this Truth and Reconciliation Commission sort of a thing with our history, what happened in South Africa. The idea again, Anand, is I emphasize again and again that it is not to demonize any community. आज के जो मुसलमान युवक हैं या युवतियां हैं, वो औरंगजेब और टिप्पू और गजनी और घोरी, इन सारे जो आक्रांता थे, इनकी जो बर्बरता है उसके लिए वो जिम्मेदार बिल्कुल नहीं है. We need to dehyphenate the Muslims of India today from all these atrocious characters. And ये जो भावना है कि अगर उनके बारे में सच बोल दिया जाए या कह दिया जाए तो आज के लोगों को कुछ उनको बुरा लगा. क्यों लगेगा भाई? I mean, first of all, their ancestors were equally impacted by these invaders. तो and दूसरी ये बात है कि कोई कम्युनिटी है, उसी
डीएनए तो सेम है, डीएनए सेम है.
अब मरवाएंगे मुझे. तो ये जो हमारी सोच है कि कोई कम्युनिटी का ही हो, उसी कम्युनिटी का आइकन हमें चूज करना है. अगर मुसलमान है, ईसाई है, हिंदू है, उसका जो आइकन है, नेशनल आइकन, they need not be of the same religion. So, but even if you want someone of a Muslim to have a Muslim icon, you have thousands of examples from Rahim to Ras Khan to Sant Shishunal Sharif from my state. You have APJ Abdul Kalam, you have Arif Muhammad Khan. You have so many people whom you can look up to. You don't have to look up to Tipu Sultan and Aurangzeb and all these people. And उसको बचाने के लिए उसका पूरा इतिहास का लेपापोती करना, I think that's a very self-defeating attitude. And the Congress and the left, I think, unwittingly in that debate with Dr. Shashi Tharoor for the India Today conclave, he let the cat out of the bag.
Who?
I don't remember your long description of the Mallu with the lungi dancing and like Marilyn Monroe and all.
No, but to come back to this, we'll delve a few minutes before we go on to the main thing is that we are all, Vikram, we are victims. You know, you are not, because you are practicing you are a practicing historian, you have studied history. But someone like me, I used to eulogize Tipu Sultan as a child, because that TV serial used to come, The Sword of Tipu Sultan. I would run around with cardboard swords and I pretend I'm a Tipu. And then the first glimpse of the real Tipu, incidentally, I got from your book, where that chapter itself, where you asked this rhetorical question, do you know why? And it was, incidentally, I read it in the Diwali week. He said, do you know why Mandayam Iyengars till this day do not celebrate Diwali? I had no idea. Tipu was like a hero for me. It was because on that day, Tipu mercilessly murdered and butchered 800 Mandayam Iyengars. To this day, they haven't forgotten. So, you know, it's like Ashoka, the myths perpetrated about Ashoka, that he, after the Kalinga war, where he killed lakhs, he converted to Buddhism. No. You know, he was a Buddhist 8 years before the Kalinga war. So many of these things, snippets of, and it affects people who are not in the field of humanities, and that's the real tragedy, because what I read about Tipu, about Aurangzeb, about Ashoka, stayed with me for about 30 years until I started to read, or the advent of social media. So it is so damaging, I cannot even describe to you what you know, this kind of airbrushed history is doing to our generation.
The objective, as Dr. Tharoor mentioned, was nation building. So we had just come out of the horrors of partition, a new nation was being formed, and so a lot of uncomfortable truths had to be brushed under the carpet.
This is the most ridiculous excuse I have ever heard.
History, you know, because history as a tool for nation building, I don't agree at all. History is a discipline like science. You don't say 2 plus 3 you know, equal to 9 only because someone wants it to be 9. It is what it is. So if facts are
nations weaken not because of their past, but rather by how they are taught it. You know.
So if that is really the case, then so many uncomfortable truths should not be spoken about. Why should you talk about caste atrocities, or why should you demonize the Brahmins or the upper caste? Why should you create fissures between Hindus and Buddhists and all of that? That also demonizes communities today. So have and why should we not have, if the tool, history is a tool for nation building, then pride for the nation also comes as a part of that. So why are we taught our history as if we've been a land of losers? We've just been losing one battle after the other.
Now, you know, the topic, of course, is Savarkar. I don't want to make it political, but you know what the progress we have made in that direction in the last 7 years, where people are proud that they haven't even changed a comma in the history textbooks. But let us come now, Vikram, to discussing Savarkar himself, and let me go, as I said, in the order of the man, the myths and the misunderstanding. So as far as Savarkar, the man, was concerned, describe to us what set him apart, because there have been hundreds, and I'm talking about the period before his incarceration in Kalapani. I mean, was there something that set him apart as far as social issues were concerned? Was it something that set him apart as far as vying for freedom was concerned? Was he so fiercely independent that the other freedom fighters were actually scared of him?
So, stormy life, 8 decades, born in 1883 in Bhagur village in Nashik to a Chitpavan Brahmin family, and died in 1966 in Bombay in a death which was not natural. In the Jain tradition of Paryopaveshan, he actually ended his life in 1966. In these 80 plus years, the storminess of the life and its, the multiple shades of it is truly mind-boggling. Someone who formed India's first organized secret society, Gupta Sanstha, जो पहले अभिनव भारत कहलाता, पहले मित्र मेला कहलाता था, बाद में अभिनव भारत बना, and which organized the first ever student bonfire of foreign clothes as a student in Ferguson College in 1905, protesting against the partition of Bengal.
This was before Gandhi's...
Gandhi, yes, 1905, जब गांधी जी South Africa में थे. तो and then 5 years, the fiery, revolutionary that he was in London, along with numerous other luminaries of the time, Shyamji Krishna Verma, Madam Bhikaji Kama, Sardar Singh Rana, MPT Acharya, BVS Iyer, Sikandar Hayat Khan, Madanlal Dhingra, Lala Hardayal, names which probably today's younger generation would not even resonate with. But then they were all campaigning in that early phase for complete liberation for India, at a time when the so-called moderates and even the extremists were actually seeking for concessions from the British. Here were the revolutionaries of India who were actually demanding total and complete liberation for the country, even in the early decades of the 20th century. You had Madam Bhikaji Kama go to the International Socialist Conference at Stuttgart in Germany and unfurling the first flag of Indian independence in 1907. And this flag was designed by Savarkar, and which had Vande Mataram written on it. And imagine, right in the Shatru ke Shibir mein jaake, you are actually unfurling the flag and saying, we don't care what you think, India is independent from today. So that was the bravery of these people. That was the first phase of Savarkar's life. The next phase, of course, he is brought to Kalapani.
We'll come to that. But as far as this phase is concerned, Vikram, was there something? Was there an incident? Because, I mean, of course, it is folklore that, Gandhiji was thrown out of the train and that kind of changed him, his whole persona and his, later on his life. Was there one incident that you can pick out that changed Savarkar?
It was the execution of the Chafekar brothers. So all through Maharashtra in the 1890s, you had the plague epidemic, or abhi jo Epidemics and Diseases Act hai, that was actually promulgated by the British in 1892. And unlike now, where the actual objective is saving the patient, then most of the British soldiers would enter the houses of people, molest women, desecrate puja ghars, and people would be caught and sent into isolation, and most of them would die there. So there was a lot of anger all over Maharashtra about the way the plague was being handled. And even Bal Gangadhar Tilak had said in his Kesari that koi mai ka lal hai jo is अत्याचार का प्रतिशोध ले सकता है, और वो प्रतिशोध लेने के लिए तीन बंधु आ गए, चाफेकर brothers, who assassinated the plague commissioner of Pune and his assistant, and for that they were obviously executed. And the folklore that it became कि भगवद गीता के स्तोत्र पढ़ते हुए वो लोग फांसी पे चढ़ गए, तो that created a lot of inspiration for the young people. And Savarkar was just about 11 or 12 years old. His mother had died by then. His father also succumbed to plague. But he was seeing all of this, and in front of the family deity Ashtabhuja Bhavani, वो रात को एक प्रतिज्ञा लेते हैं कि शत्रु मारता मारता मरे तो जुंजेन, in Marathi, which meant कि शत्रु को मारते मारते मैं मारूंगा, मैं खुद नहीं मरूंगा, उनको अंत तक मैं मारूंगा. तो और and he followed up this प्रतिज्ञा by forming the अभिनव भारत, which was, as I said, भारत का सबसे पहला जो गुप्त संस्था है, organized secret society, inspired not by Karl Marx but by the Italian revolutionaries, Mazzini and Garibaldi and all of that, who had done their young Italy. And the main philosophy there was, can we infiltrate the Indian army in some way, the British Indian army, and create a Bagawat there? Can we have a repeat of 1857, and which is what, as we know, as history has told us, eventually it was the uprising within the army, the naval mutiny, and the heroics of Netaji and the INA, which is what got India her freedom.
Are you trying to be a Kangana here and get me and you arrested as well?
आप मुझे बिल्कुल मरवाने पे तुले हैं. पहले डीएनए की बात करते हैं, फिर कंगना की बात करते हैं, तो I don't want to get to that level of हमें भीख में मिली या नहीं मिली वो पता नहीं है.
I think that was an extreme remark.
Extreme,
but there is logic behind.
It certainly calls for introspection. और 75 years हो गए हैं. I think अब तो हमको अपने स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के इतिहास को थोड़ा dispassionate होके देखना चाहिए कि what were the main causes. और ये हम और आप नहीं बोल रहे हैं. When Lord Clement Attlee came to India in the 1950s, वो जाते हैं बंगाल, वहाँ पे जो गवर्नर साहब हैं फणिभूषण चक्रवर्ती, उनसे मिलते हैं. He was also I think the judge of the Calcutta High Court. तो चक्रवर्ती साहब asked Lord Clement Attlee was the Prime Minister of Britain when the transfer of power was handed over to India. So everybody was quite surprised. Even Dr. Ambedkar says in that speech, interview to the BBC, that we were all very surprised as to why did the British leave us and go. In fact, even the actual date of the British going out of India was about June or July 1948. So एक साल पहले आप क्यों भागम भाग करते भाग गए हमारे देश से? तो चक्रवर्ती साहब asked Lord Attlee, and he as to what drove you out of India, and he clearly mentions that it was the INA, it was Subhash Chandra Bose's heroics, and also the uprising in the British Indian Army, the British Indian Navy, which really shook the British Empire from its roots, and they wanted to leave as soon as possible. Mountbatten was given the express, command that from that wreckage you try to salvage as much as possible and come back. So, and then Chakrabarti ji further asks Attlee, what about the impact of Gandhiji, the Quit India movement and the Ahimsa Andolan? How much did that influence your eventual decision to leave India? And with a smirk, Attlee is supposed to have said minimal. So this is not something that we are saying.
If Attlee was alive, he would have been in the next cell next to Kangana for his remarks.
So this is how we need to.
Incidentally, not many people know this. I read it in a book called Indian Summer, which is a magnificent this thing that Britain owed India £1 billion in 1957, which they paid back in 2001. So they were bankrupt. I mean, they could not hold India. That is another one of the things. But coming back to very quickly finishing this first period. So there is nothing overtly what people like to phrase as Islamophobic about Savarkar in that period. He was mingling with other revolutionaries. His aim was to make the British leave India. There was nothing overtly Hindu. He was very progressive in that sense. Why is Savarkar demonized even for this period of his life is what beats me, because he, at least for this period, he is head and shoulders above so many other luminaries and revolutionaries.
No, I think a lot of his critics actually give him credit, saying we actually appreciate the Savarkar before Kalapani, and we have a lot of respect for him. But the Savarkar post Kalapani and the so-called, groveling mercy petitions that he supposedly written, that is when the narrative goes against him. Because, in London, he was the one who coined the word, the first war of Indian independence, which was till then called as the Sepoy Mutiny. To give it some level of respect, that it was the first war of Indian independence. Incidentally, we still call it the naval mutiny. We don't call it the last war of Indian independence, which is what it should have been in that true tradition right from 1857 to 1946. So that era of his life in that book also, he in fact castigates even the Hindu ruler, the Scindia, whom he calls Jayaji Rao Scindia, who it said betrayed Rani Lakshmi Bai and so on during the 1857.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of lines from that iconic poem have been removed.
Khoob Ladi Mardani, usme bhi aata hai wo. So in that book he calls Scindia as a coward, a cobra, a traitor and all of that. And praises Bahadur Shah Zafar, praises all the Muslim leaders, and in fact also in his speeches in London he says India is like a rainbow. The Hindus are one color, a dominant color, but all colors are needed to complete this rainbow and so on. But I think what changed his entire outlook was that very, very dangerous movement which was started in the 1920s, the end of it, the Khilafat agitation. It's a nice word play कि आप खिलाफत बोल देंगे तो सब लोग समझेंगे कि अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ जो अभियान चला था.
To be honest, it is a master stroke, because 90% of the people, including me when I was young, I thought खिलाफत was
such a nice thing. जो अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ जो अभियान है उसको खिलाफत बोला जाता है, but then actually it was the caliphate movement. तो टर्की में जो सुल्तान था, कैलिफ था, उसको ब्रिटिश ने पराजित कर दिया था फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद. एंड टू द पीपल ऑफ टर्की डिड नॉट वांट दिस मैन ऑन द थ्रोन. यू हैड मुस्तफा केमाल अटातुर्क हु केम टू पावर देयर, बट देन द मुस्लिम्स ऑफ इंडिया वर बीइंग मोबिलाइज्ड, saying you participate in the non-cooperation movement. In return, we will support the establishment of a caliphate in Turkey, which is thousands of kilometers away. So why should it matter to an Indian Muslim whether a caliph rules in Turkey or someone else rules in Turkey? Their concerns and conditions about India, which was a slave nation, were as important as a Hindu or a Christian or a Parsi. So to put this premium to somebody's support also ensures that those people then up your, price all the more, and you have to keep giving in. And Gandhiji had also announced that within 1 year, both Swaraj will be established and the Caliphate will be established.
Coming to the myths part, and I principally, as gleaning from your 2 volumes, the myths that surround Savarkar are, some of them are quite comical in the sense, one of them is that he coined Veer for himself, right? He wrote his own biography. Before I come to the other 2 myths, what do you have to say to these 2?
It is comical, as you rightly said. In fact, in my book, I have mentioned the sources also, that he was called Swatantra Veer in a public function in Nasik after he was released from cellular jail in 1924. And Vaman Rao Joshi, one of the famous Marathi poets and journalists, was who gave this epithet to him, and that stuck. Now the Maharashtrians are very, they are given to a lot of bombast and a lot of dramatic, kind of talk. So, being half a Maharashtrian myself, I can identify with that. A lot of people are given nice upadhis and prefixes and so on. So, Swatantra Veer was something that was given to him by these people, and that stuck because they knew the kind of tortures he had suffered in Kalapani, most inhuman sufferings, which probably very few other no one from the Congress at least ever went to Kalapani and suffered those kind of ignominies. So, and his revolutionary activities, the book on 1857 and all of that, for which he was given this title. So to say that he gave it to himself and all that is a little bit of an overstretch. But this book also, Life of Barrister Savarkar, written in a pseudonym called Chitragupta. The advertisement of the book, I have put that original in the Bombay Chronicle, it came that this book was actually written by a friend of Savarkar, is what it was written. And it was published in Madras. At that time, Savarkar was in Ratnagiri in Maharashtra. So there were 2 assumptions there. One was that either it was Savarkar's associate VVS Iyer, who was with him in London, who was, after Savarkar got caught, he came away to Pondicherry, was associated with Subramaniam Bharati and all of them. He is probably the one who wrote that book. The other assumption, which caught a lot of speculation, was when Savarkar got released in 1937, Rajaji, Rajgopalachari, gave a message that I had written a biography of his a couple of decades ago or something. And about that, there was a lot of social media.
I know, yeah. All you did was you put the facts out.
Yeah, it was in the Lokamanya newspaper of June 1937.
But there is a contentious myth that surrounds Savarkar, and the people who hate him, make no bones about it. They bring it up every time. It is about that egregious rape remark. The rape remark. Could you clarify on that? Because as it happens, you've not been asked this question before, so if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. No, that also, Savarkar was a great poet, but a very bad historian, an amateur historian who brought that entire emotion into writing history, which is not a great thing to do. So, and in Marathi, what he wrote, the way it got translated into English, left room for a lot of misinterpretation, which happened in this case. So in that book, 6 glorious epochs of Indian history is where this remark comes, where it is made to believe that he advocated rape as a tool, especially against the Muslims, which is completely false. What he said there was, and he actually shides even Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and Chimaji Appa and all these people, saying, when you were given an opportunity to show the enemy his place, you did not do it. And he called this as Sadguna Vikriti. The virtues, when you have virtuous things, like we will not attack by night, we will not attack women and children. Now, during the Mahabharata times, both sides could comply to these unwritten ethics of war. After sunset, we will not attack each other. But then you are faced with...
Now we have Geneva Convention.
Geneva Convention. So all the people who are part of the convention need to be signatories. Now in the Mahabharata war, the Pandavas and the Kauravas both would follow this rule. Even they would not, the way Draupadi's sons were killed by stealth in the night. Similarly, here you were faced with the Islamic conquerors who did not believe in all these ethics of war. So for them, anything was okay, raping the opponent's women, breaking their places of worship, or any of all of that. So his whole contention was, if you are unilaterally being nice to someone and they are not reciprocating it, how will that help? And if you had responded in the same coin and the same language that they understand, maybe millions of our women would have been saved, because the fear of God would be placed in their hearts that if we ill-treat them, they will also ill-treat us. So that was what he meant in the Marathi original, which in translation almost got to mean that he said everybody should go and rape a particular community and its women, which is absolutely untrue.
Right. Now, I think before I throw open to the audience for a couple of questions, as I've been requested to, one last question. I'm sorry we've run out of time, but I wanted to delve more deeper into the misunderstanding aspect of it, but I think anything you say on Savarkar would be misunderstood. So I think what we've been discussing over the past 1 hour is included in that. But one thing about Kapoor Commission I'd like to ask you, because when Kapoor Commission was set up, this was...
You believe it's very true. You believe it's very true. We have our differences there.
Yes, I don't disbelieve it, let me put it that way, because it was a Supreme Court judge, it was a commission that was appointed objectively to look at something, a new evidence had come up. I put the Hanlon's razor here in the sense that if, for example, the present government had constituted a commission to look into something, you can't dismiss it outright. What is your opinion about the conclusion, that single sentence of Kapoor Commission, that incidentally Supreme Court did not reject it per se, but did not, threw out the PIL. But would you disagree with the Kapoor Commission when he says that there is no other alternative except the fact that it was Savarkar and his associates who planned and executed the assassination?
So it's very interesting that the Kapoor Commission was set up not to reopen the entire Gandhi murder trial, but only one particular aspect. When Gopal Godse, Karkare and others had come out, it was Ketkar, G.V. Ketkar, who was the editor of the Kesari.
Kesari or Tarun? Was it Kesari?
And the grandson of Lokmanya Tilak, in a public function, he said, we already had information about Gandhi's murder, and we had actually sent the information both to the Maharashtra government and the central government. And so that obviously created a lot of furor in Maharashtra Assembly and in the Parliament, saying if already there was prior information about Gandhi's murder, why was no action taken? And the Kapoor Commission was set up with very specific terms of reference to investigate Ketkar's statement. Did he know about it? If he knew, did he tell it to somebody? If he had told, what did those governments do about the information? That was the specific terms of reference. Now, throughout the Kapoor Commission, it's an exhaustive 500, 600 page report which is available online and everybody could download and read it. He keeps saying that there was a Savarkarite faction within the Hindu Mahasabha which executed the murder of Gandhi, which is true. I mean, Godse and Apte were part of the Hindu Rashtra Dal, a very militant kind of a Hindu organization, which was part of the Hindu Mahasabha, who did the murder. So all through, that is true, where he says the Savarkarite faction. But how do you extrapolate that and say it was Savarkar who actually inspired the murder? There is no corroborative evidence or proof for that. So in 1948, after Gandhi's murder, Gandhians went on a rampage and killed Maharashtrian Brahmins all over, Maharashtra, central India and so on. For that you can't say if Gandhians or congressmen actually killed someone, you can't hold Gandhi responsible for that. So similarly, there was no corroborative evidence in the entire report. The only evidence that was there was that approver called Digambar Badge, who had said Godse and Apte went to meet Savarkar and he said in Marathi, Yashasvi hoon ya, be successful and come back. And that was supposedly corroborated under police coercion by Savarkar's secretary Gajanandam Damle and his bodyguard Appa Kasar. Now, curiously,
who weren't brought in as witnesses.
No, they were not. They were not. They were alive. They gave this evidence. They said, yes, we heard Godse and Apte say this. Meet Savarkar, and he said this Yashasvi ho India to them. But both these people, on whose evidence the entire edifice of the prosecution stood, were not called by the Red Fort trials by Justice Atmacharan, though they were alive. So it was a coercive statement given under police, coercion. Versus the Kapoor Commission actually called 101 witnesses. If you see the appendix, there are 101 witnesses who were there. Appa Kasar and Gajanan Damle were not called by the commission, though they were alive at that time, and Savarkar was also dead by then. So there was nothing that was holding the commission back from actually calling the prime witnesses on the basis of whose testimony this whole phrase actually lay. So without any corroborative evidence, and all through, if you look at the Kapoor Commission, it keeps saying the Savarkarite faction. Suddenly to extrapolate that and say, hence there is very little destructive evidence which destroys the proof that Savarkar was behind the murder. Maybe he was, maybe he was not, we'll never know. But to extrapolate it that way, I think is a tad unfair, especially when the person is dead and no one from his side was even called to defend his point of view.
But the Kapoor Commission had begun while Savarkar was still alive, right?
He died. He was never called to the commission because the idea, as I said, was not to reopen Gandhi's murder case at all. The idea was very, very specific, in that particular thing.
Yeah. And incidentally,
Anand, the best part was Indira Gandhi's government was there when the Kapoor Commission when the Kapoor Commission submitted its report. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. There was no action taken report on the commission report. The commission was not even, the report was not even tabled in Parliament, so it was junk. So on the basis of that, and as you rightly said, the Supreme Court recently threw an amicus curiae. It actually, while it threw away the petition, the PIL, which sought to reopen the case, it also said that the entire contention that the Kapoor Commission held Savarkar guilty does not hold. Because the Commission of Enquiry does not have the power to overturn a trial court's judgment.
Right. Thanks so much, Vikram. I now throw open the floor for a couple of questions. Before I do a brainwave to ask you one final question, do you think, in your mind, deserves the Bharat Ratna?
It really does not matter. I think.
Come on, you can't escape answering that.
Well, people like him, Sardar Patel got the Bharat Ratna so many decades after his death. Ambedkar got it so much later. I think these awards get honored if you give it to people like these, rather than award it to yourself while you were alive, like many of our prime ministers did. So it really does not matter to Savarkar or in fact even to his family for the sacrifices they have suffered that you give them the Bharat Ratna or not. But I think if it is to the extent that we need to democratize these awards and not make it the preserve of just one family or one group of people, to that extent I would certainly say you need to honor a lot more heroes who are outside that monochromatic stream of freedom struggle. All these subaltern voices of our freedom movement need to be recognized and rewarded. And to that extent, yes, he does deserve it.
Thank you so much. Can we have, yes, there is a hand that's gone up there from Madam. Yeah. Could you give the mic to her? Yeah. If you could keep your question very crisp and concise and direct.
I am Tripti Mishra and I am wife of an army officer. And you said कि जो आपने एक बात कही कि आज के मुसलमान, you should not take it politically, but आपने कहा था कि आज के मुसलमान उस चीज़ के लिए बिल्कुल जिम्मेदार नहीं है जो उनके पूर्वजों ने किया. तो I just want to know your views कि जो आज किया जा रहा है, जो आज वो लोग कर रहे हैं, क्या वो आप जो भी बहुत सारी चीज़ें चल रही हैं, जिहाद है या जो भी है, तो क्या आप उसको डिनाई करते हैं कि कोई भी उसके लिए जिम्मेदार नहीं है उन लोगों में से?
terror organizations which have caused so much of murder and genocides across the world, you cannot compare apples and oranges and just to make these false equivalences. So आज जो हो रहा है उसके लिए भी, I mean, the philosophy, the tendency which is causing this, and Anand always keeps saying that we keep blaming the fundamentalists, but we do spare the fundamentals. So some aspects of the theology too, which allow this kind of tendencies, I think it's therefore everybody, including people of the community too, to stand up and say that was written probably in the 8th century, it is not relevant today, and if we are living in a multi-religious, multi-racial country with tolerance with others, a lot of that needs to be rejected. It is not relevant.
Now, there is something else, because I'm just tying it to Savarkar, the question. There is something else that is attributed to Savarkar by a lot of people. Did he envisage non-Hindus as secondary citizens at all? Because this is something that comes up again and again.
It is again a myth which is perpetuated, because in his Hindu Rashtra Darshan, he says there need not even be a ghost of suspicion in the minds of the religious minorities of India that their legitimate cultural, religious and linguistic rights will be infringed upon.
So he wasn't saying that voting rights should be taken away, unlike one BJP politician who said it and now might join the TMC.
Not at all. In fact, he said the Hindus, the majority will not get any extra privileges because they are more in number. Similarly, the minorities will not get any extra concessions because they are less in number. Everybody is equal in the eyes of the law. जो पूजा पद्धति है, पूजा अर्चना नमाज जो भी आप करते हैं, आप अपने घर में कीजिए. Don't bring that into the public space or into politics. And minority institutions can thrive. The government can also give grants to madrasas or churches or whatever, temples.
So his problem was
a percentage. The amount of money given by the government should be a percentage of the taxes that community pays to the national exchequer. So if you are useful to the country, aapko milega. If you are a liability, then you will not. So what else is secularism?
I think his problem was that he said everyone should be equal. Had he said Hindus should be inferior, then maybe they would have loved Savarkar.
Was there any logic for him supporting Khilafat movement? Supporting and promoting Khilafat movement?
Was there any logic?
I mean, can you think there is any logic?
Was there any logic at all in whatever Gandhiji did?
So, they say
may his Atma forgive me.
The road to hell is always paved with the best of intentions. So I think his intention was, now if you see steadily after 1857 when the Muslim community participated with great strength in the uprising, then you had Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and others who said, let's stay away from the nationalistic movement, let's be loyal to the British and so on, and the whole Aligarh Muslim University movement started. So after that, the steady decline in the participation of Muslims in the earlier sessions of the Indian National Congress, there was this need that was thought to somehow get them into the freedom movement. The way to get them, I think, was totally wrong, to actually stir up communal passions and get them. There should have been better ways to make it a more inclusive movement, not by making a premium to their participation on a blatantly communal issue like Khilafat.
Thanks, Vikram. Now, if I can take 30 seconds.
That is always your...
I apologize for that, but because we already ran out of time, but because somebody asked about Gandhiji, and I love Gandhiji, and this is Gandhi Hall. You're talking about logic and Mahatma Gandhi, so let me tell you what was Mahatma Gandhi's appeal to Britons on the eve of the Battle of Britain and the Nazi invasion. This is what he said, and I quote him. Fight Nazism without arms. Invite Herr Hitler to take possession of your island. If he refuses to give a free passage out, allow yourself, man, woman and child to be slaughtered. This is the logic of Mahatma Gandhi. What were Mahatma Gandhi's views on the Holocaust and what the Jews should have done? I again quote him. Disarm Hitler by praying to him. Jews should have offered themselves to the butcher's knife, thrown themselves into the sea from cliffs. As it is, they succumbed anyway in their millions. So I rest my case. It leaves me to thank profusely my good friend Vikram and of course
Thank you,
the organizers
Anand.
for
As I
giving me
said,
the opportunity.
thanks to Praveen ji that finally the two of us got onto one stage
I know.
on this topic, and
Yes.
I'm very, very thankful to the Indore Live Fest for that.